I'm Callista.
And I'm Teresa, and this is Terrifyingly Typical True Crime.
We're continuing with our theme of Daughters Who Kill, and we're once again talking about a girl who killed her family with the help of her quote unquote boyfriend, which I'm using for lack of a better term, but she was 12 and he was 23, so I don't think anyone, besides them, would classify it as a romantic relationship. If you haven't guessed already, today we're talking about Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinke.
On April 23rd, 2006, a boy from the neighborhood braved the cold spring day to go over to the Richardsons' gray weatherboard home for a play date with his friend Tyler Jacob. He walked past the neat green lawn to look through the window, but upon peering inside, he saw what looked like bodies. The shocked young boy raced home to tell his mom. After she too went to the Richardson home to confirm her son's story, she alerted the police. It turned out that earlier in the day, the Richardsons' nearby neighbors had also heard a cry and loud noises coming from the house, but having not seen anything amiss, they hadn't contacted the police. When Inspector Brent Sekundiak got to the scene after the mother's call, he too looked through a window, and through the basement window, he noticed at least one person laying on the floor. After calling for backup, police entered the house with their guns drawn, only to be met with bloody handprints on the interior walls beside the front door.
Police then found 48-year-old Debra's and 42-year-old Marc's bodies in the basement of the split-level home, along with 8-year-old Tyler Jacobs' body on his bed upstairs with his throat slit. 12-year-old Jasmine was nowhere to be found. At first, no one thought she had been involved. She was only a child after all. And when police later learned that Debra had been murdered first and that Marc had then attempted to use a screwdriver to fight back but was fatally stabbed too, they put out an Amber Alert for Jasmine, fearing that she may have been abducted by the killer. But after police had combed through her bedroom and been shown a drawing found in Jasmine's school locker by the guidance counselor, Jasmine's involvement became clear. This concerning drawing showed a girl lighting her house on fire, then escaping with her boyfriend as her family burned inside. So, who were the Richardsons and why did Jasmine want her family dead? Let's go back to the beginning to find out.
Debra and Marc Richardson met while in recovery for substance use disorder. Even though this may have been a rocky start, their relationship flourished and they started a family. They had their daughter, Jasmine Richardson, on October 21st, 1993, in Ontario, Canada, then moved to Okotoks, a small farming town, before the birth of their son, Tyler Jacob. The Richardsons initially struggled to make ends meet, but after Marc received a promotion in 2005, the family moved to a new home in the suburbs of Medicine Hat, Alberta, a community with a population of approximately 57,000. People saw them as a typical family. The Richardsons were quiet neighbors, and Jasmine was an honor roll student involved in a fine arts program. But things would change for Jasmine after a trip with her friends to the Medicine Hat Mall in 2005, when Jasmine encountered some older goth kids and developed an interest in the scene. At the age of 11, she changed her appearance to fit into the subculture and joined, love it, vampirefreaks.com. At the same time that she was making liberal use of eyeliner, darkening her wardrobe, and claiming to be a Wiccan, she joined MySpace in its heyday.
To me, none of those things sound particularly problematic. I don't think there is anything inherently wrong with being goth. It's just a way of expressing yourself.
I agree. Everyone doesn't fit into the same social circle or have the same interests. I did try and find some more info on vampirefreaks.com because seriously, that name.
Mhm.
But the webpage now seems to be just like a goth storefront for clothes and accessories. Anytime a chat room is indicated, I get a little skeeved out because it just seems like a hunting ground for predators. But different clothes, makeup, hair as a preteen or teen, you are just expressing yourself. I mean, knock yourself out.
100%. What does cause concern, though, was that Jasmine was pretending to be older than she was. For example, her Nexopia profile, which was a Canadian social networking site for teenagers that was later investigated for violating privacy laws, stated that she was 16. She also started drinking and learning about serial killers, and in her own words, was interested in kinky shit. Without knowing what this kinky shit was, I think the most worrisome out of the three is drinking as a preteen.
Yeah, pretending to be 16 when you are 11 is just all kinds of scary and truly not safe. Drinking isn't great as a preteen, like you said. You are easy prey, not to mention drinking copious amounts of alcohol at 11 or 12 isn't going to lead to anything good. Learning about quote unquote kinky shit without any context could mean all kinds of things.
Most definitely. I feel like kinky is on a spectrum. When these changes first started happening, her parents thought she was just being a teenager, trying to find herself in her own way. But when Jasmine began hanging out with older goth kids and attending local rock concerts, they started to enforce stricter rules to keep her safe. To Jasmine, this seemed unfair, and she tried and failed on numerous occasions to get placed in a foster home.
I mean, that seems like quite the overreaction.
It really does. My parents won't let me do everything I want, so I'll seek out a new family. That's rather extreme. But the moment that spelled the beginning of the end for Jasmine's parents and brother was when she met Jeremy Steinke.
Born in Medicine Hat on January 15th, 1983, Jeremy's mother, Jacqueline Ann May, struggled with alcohol use disorder, and it's possible that he was born with fetal alcohol syndrome. Fetal alcohol syndrome affects approximately 1 in 1,000 children, and besides the physical development issues associated with it, it also is related to learning, behavioral, and social issues. This less than ideal start in life only continued. Jacqueline, who now has a terminal lung disease and uses a portable oxygen tank, would later testify that two of her three husbands physically abused Jeremy and one of her boyfriends verbally abused him also.
Jeremy's father was one of the men to fit this pattern. He began beating his son with a belt when he was around the age of 2 and would occasionally grab him by the ears to either carry or drag Jeremy into his room. When Jeremy was 13, he was diagnosed with hyperactivity and depression. He would frequently cut himself to relieve his mental anguish, and in addition to constantly telling his mom that he wished he were dead, he tried to hang himself at least once.
I will say what I said in a Kim Edwards episode about Lucas. I feel for young Jeremy and the piece of shit men his mom allowed into their lives.
Same. Because of his mother continually moving them around, Jeremy never had a friend for long. And at school, he was bullied and called really imaginatively, I thought, Stinky as a play on his last name.
I mean, God, kids suck.
No argument for me about that. After starting to drink at 14, he began using acid, ecstasy, marijuana, and magic mushrooms, and dropped out of high school around the age of 16. At 16, he went to live with his biological father, but not finding a much better home environment here, he left to try to create a better life on his own.
He worked odd jobs while studying at Medicine Hat College, but later dropped out to work full time.
As someone without a medical degree, I'm not going to offer too many diagnoses, but I think it's safe to say that even if Jeremy wasn't born with fetal alcohol syndrome, his early exit from academic life and his agreement to go along with Jasmine's plan, which we'll come on to shortly, shows he struggled with school and was easily influenced by those around him.
Yeah, and I just have to interject that, when we have a shit home life and then we have a shit school life, I mean, everything's stacked against you. Obviously, Jeremy goes on to do bad things, but just feel for people's environment. I really, really do.
Definitely. I have so much sympathy for anyone who's traumatized, but of course, your past doesn't excuse your present actions.
True. Jeremy said that he was a 300-year-old werewolf who could eat people. He even wore a blood vial necklace to cement his dark vibe. He also wore dark clothes and sometimes put on eyeliner to fit in with the goth scene. He too was involved in the online goth subculture and wanted to become a metal musician. He began giving young goth teens drugs and alcohol as a reason for them to hang around him. Like Jasmine, he joined Vampire Freaks. Unlike Jasmine, though, he also posted about enjoying killing sex workers.
And we've now entered the stage where my sympathy for him, given his awful childhood, evaporates.
I agree. What the actual fuck?
He has to be doing a lot of this for shock value.
I'm sure. Do you really want to attract and interact with people that think it's cool that you talk about enjoying, even if it's fucked up fantasy, killing sex workers?
Apparently. It was in January 2006 that a mutual friend introduced the 23-year-old Jeremy to the 12-year-old Jasmine, although it's worth noting that it's also been reported that they met at a punk rock show or online. But however they met, they began communicating online and entered into a quote unquote relationship.
This makes me want to throw up a little bit. It's just so fucking twisted.
Yeah, for real. And when Deborah and Mark found out that Jeremy had sent Jasmine a message about killing people together, they took away her computer privileges and told her she could no longer see him.
I mean, they were really trying to do the right thing.
And they continue to do so. Jeremy's friends said that they told Jeremy he needed to end the inappropriate relationship, but Jeremy, for his part, said that Jasmine claimed she was older than she was. Top notch reasoning to continue pursuing a 12-year-old right there.
She did lie, but when you realized it was a lie and she was 12, not 16, I mean, that's just sick, dude. He should have listened to his friends.
If only. Jasmine parents sought family therapy. This did seem to be having an impact until Jasmine started sneaking out to see Jeremy, that is. Jasmine was becoming more and more enraged that she was being prevented from seeing him. And let me just reiterate that I really do think Mark and Deborah were doing their best to help their daughter. It just unfortunately didn't work.
Yeah, Jasmine and Jeremy believed that they were in love and had to be together, and that her parents were standing in their way. On April 3rd, 2006, Jeremy wrote the following on his blog: Payment, my lover. Sorry, payment, my lover's rent are totally gosh darn it, payment, my lover's rents instead of parents. There we go. Are totally unfair. They say that they really care. They don't know what is going on. Their throats I want to slit. Finally, there shall be silence. Their blood shall be payment. In spite of the violent post, which I really had issues with, obviously, Jasmine was the one to email Jeremy with her plan to kill her parents so that they could run away together. She wrote, "It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you." In response, Jeremy said, "Well, I love your plan, but we need to get a little more creative, like with details and stuff. It's just so freaking angsty."
Yeah, I think Jeremy sounds younger than he is. I'd say he sounds more like he's in his teens, not his 20s, although, admittedly, I don't hang out with guys in their early 20s, so maybe most of them sound this young.
I also don't hang out with guys in their 20s, but to me, he sounds a lot younger. I mean, maybe that's why he thought it was okay to date a freaking 12-year-old.
Maybe. They just really have that whole teenage mentality of the world's against us, we're just doing what we have to.
Yeah, Jasmine had repeatedly told her friends that she planned to kill Debra and Mark, who had rightly grounded her after they saw her kissing Jeremy at a punk rock concert so that she could live with Jeremy. I mean, how was that going to work?
Their lack of forethought is a major theme. But these friends claim that they believed she was joking, which, if your preteen friend said this, you would, wouldn't you? Four of these friends, who had all been in grade 7 with Jasmine in 2006, later testified. Two stated that Jasmine had begun to change when she met Jeremy. She no longer saw her friends often and instead hung around Jeremy and his group. And I'll interject here to say that could either be seen as typical teenage infatuation or a sign that Jeremy was isolating her.
I know he was 23, but I feel like Jasmine was guiding the ship and she wanted to hang with Jeremy as opposed to her friends. After all, she had to set the groundwork for him to do what she wanted, which was get rid of her parents.
Those are good points. One Fred said that in addition to Deborah and Mark having taken Jasmine's phone and computer, they also forbade her from wearing makeup. Another claimed that she overheard a phone conversation between Jasmine and Jeremy, during which Jasmine asked for his help in murdering her parents. But one of the girls told the court that Jasmine only said she wanted Deborah and Mark dead, not that she wanted to kill them. This girl also admitted that she never liked Jeremy because he was so much older, saying, I never thought of him as dangerous, just older but very immature, which, fair enough.
Before the murders occurred, Jasmine and Jeremy watched Oliver Stone's, as they all do, Natural Born Killers, Jeremy's favorite movie, which was released in 1994 and is about two young serial killers who first kill their girlfriend's parents, then go on to kill a total of 52 people across the states, becoming tabloid sensations. A friend of Jeremy's said that Jeremy had described the movie as the best love story of all time. Jeremy had also said that the main difference between the movie and their real life plan would be that Jasmine's brother would also be killed. I feel like we should have a list going again of how many murders are influenced by this movie. It's fiction, people. No one is suggesting you actually go on a killing spree.
Maybe the movie needs a disclaimer that it's not a serial killer ad.
Maybe. On the day before the murders, Jeremy went to the store, bought gum, then arrived at the Richardson home early in the morning of the next day, heavily intoxicated from drugs and copious amounts of alcohol, as he would be given that he had snorted multiple lines of cocaine beforehand. As Jasmine's family slept, Jeremy threw either a pine cone or a pebble at Jasmine's window. Then, since Jasmine had told him to meet her at the back of the house, he came in via a basement window that she had left open.
That's what Jeremy said happened anyway. Jasmine later claimed that even though she had called Jeremy that night to tell him she wanted to go through with killing Debra and Marc, it had been a joke.
Yeah, right. They talked and planned, but now it's a joke.
It's funny how it's always a joke after it's gone too far. Jasmine said that she woke up to the sound of Jeremy breaking into the home, then heard her mother scream when she went downstairs to find Jeremy. At the sound of Deborah's scream, her father and brother both barreled out of their rooms too.
Jasmine said she could hear Jeremy and Mark fighting downstairs and later came across her mother's body surrounded by a pool of blood. Jasmine claimed that she and Jeremy didn't have a plan to kill her family. Jeremy had just started attacking her parents, and her shock left her in no fit state to stop him. She later said the following at her trial: I was like a zombie. I could barely function. It didn't even enter my mind to call 911. Despite barely being able to function, Jasmine then ran upstairs and lunged for the kitchen knife that she had put in her closet for protection. But Jeremy had followed her. Blood soaked and reeling, he yelled for her to kill Tyler Jacob. She said, I can't. To which he replied, You have to. I did this for you.
Let's pause here. I obviously don't know what actually happened that night, but when did Jasmine put this knife in her closet if she's claiming Jeremy broke in? While he was attacking her parents? Before he came to the house? She claims it was for her protection. So did she think Jeremy was going to attack her too?
I mean, so many good points. Was the knife because she planned on killing her little brother, or did she feel like it was there just in case her parents tried to, I don't know, parent her and reiterate she couldn't see Jeremy and she would what, attack them?
Either way, I don't think that knife was meant to be used on Jeremy.
Definitely not. Back to Jasmine's story. She then said that her brother begged her to spare his life, telling her, I'm scared, I'm too young to die. Nonetheless, Jasmine stabbed him once in the upper body. Then Jeremy took the knife from her and slashed Tyler Jacobs' throat. Unable to look, she said she could hear her brother gurgling as he attempted to breathe.
Coming back to Jeremy's story, he said it was Jasmine who slit Tyler Jacobs' throat as he looked on from the doorway, and that she laughed about it the next day. He claimed that he had been waiting for Jasmine in the basement when a nightgown clad Deborah flipped on the light switch and found him there. So he attacked her first. Deborah, who was unarmed, was stabbed 12 times with some of the wounds injuring her lungs, along with a 12-centimeter deep stab wound to her aorta. She also had injuries to her legs, arms, and fingers, likely defensive wounds, and was holding onto a handful of hair. She was killed at the bottom of the staircase leading out of the basement, and her body was found covered in blood. The blood she lost during the attack had been splattered on the ceiling, walls, and floor of the basement.
After rushing down the basement stairs in only his boxer shorts at the sound of Deborah's screams, with only a small screwdriver to defend himself, Mark ran towards Jeremy. Before his death, Mark asked Jeremy, who was wearing a neoprene mask, why he was doing this, and Jeremy replied, It's what your daughter wanted. Jeremy killed Mark while he had his arms raised above his head and his hands were in unclenched fists. Mark was stabbed 24 times all over his body, which included 9 stab wounds to the back. He was slashed so many times during the struggle that those wounds couldn't even be accurately counted. They showed the fight he had put up against Jeremy, as did the blood spanning from one side of the basement to the other and the blood soaked area around the smashed staircase banister.
In fact, Mark's blood was discovered on almost everything in the basement: the futon bed, the television, the gas fireplace, and an exercise ball. The blood splatter in the basement and lack of a distinct trail to the upstairs led to the conclusion that both Deborah and Mark had been attacked and died in the basement. They had never gotten the chance to get back upstairs to prevent their daughter from killing her brother. Tyler Jacob had been stabbed 4 times in the face and chest. Beyond those wounds, his jugular vein had also been severed. Jeremy claimed that Jasmine was the one to decide to kill her brother, and that while Jeremy had murdered Jasmine's parents downstairs, Jasmine had been in Tyler Jacobs' room. Before stabbing him and probably slitting his throat, she put Tyler Jacob in a chokehold, and tiny spots of bleeding inside her brother's mouth and eyelids were clear signs of the strangulation.
The sheets on Tyler Jacobs' bed were blood soaked, and blood was also splattered on the door and walls of his room. His mouth and eyes remained open, and the toy lightsaber and stuffed animals next to him were also stained with his blood. Police discovered more than 100 drops of Tyler Jacobs' blood along the hallway that led to his room, along with blood on the stairwell that went to the basement. This meant that Tyler Jacobs suffered at least one stab wound outside of his bedroom, which would tally with Jasmine saying he had come out of his room at the sounds of the struggle.
The self sharpening kitchen knife used in Tyler Jacobs' attack had been rinsed in the bathroom upstairs in which it was found, but still had traces of his diluted blood on it. The blood-stained and broken knife that had killed Deborah and Mark was discovered downstairs beside Mark's body. As police officers searched the home and uncovered the myriad of gory evidence, the Richardsons' small black dog remained barking next to Deborah. The medical examiner and police officers found the house covered in blood smears, sprays, and drops. Unsurprisingly, all 3 victims were found to have died from blood loss. A stuffed animal and flowers were placed on the Richardson family lawn after the family was discovered.
And not to sound difficult here, but I used to find this practice kind of odd, placing mementos by a house where some horrific tragedy has happened.
Mhm.
But then my cynical heart realized that in a tragic situation like this, people just want to show their sympathy. And really, what else can they do?
I mean, it's certainly true that killers revisit the scene of the crime and get off on the devastation they've caused, but I think the majority of visitors are leaving mementos to honor the victims, or at least I hope.
Yeah.
After Jasmine's family was dead, Jeremy drove back home to shower and remove all traces of their blood. Jasmine grabbed Deborah's purse before calling a taxi to go withdraw cash from an ATM at a convenience store close to the house.
Of course she did.
Jeremy was shoving things into a backpack and garbage bag when Jasmine had the taxi drop her off at Jeremy's trailer in the Tower Estates trailer park in Medicine Hat.
19-year-old Mitchell Dayton testified that he had stayed over at Jeremy's trailer on April 22nd, 2006, and that Jeremy left late at night only to come back in the morning with a black eye. Jasmine arrived with the cash on the morning of April 23rd, and before they left, Jeremy said to Mitchell, "If anybody asks, you haven't seen me. I wasn't here all weekend."
I think we've already given the game away as to whose story we believe, but I'll say that I have a hard time believing that Jeremy was the one to kill Jasmine's entire family, which they hadn't planned, but Jasmine then decided to steal from her dead mother and go be with him. I guess you could say she had no one else to turn to, but I still find that hard to buy.
I know we will talk about it more in a bit, but Jasmine needed Jeremy to kill her parents. Physically, she didn't think she would be able to overpower both parents. But the Tyler Jacob murder, it just hurts my soul. If we are to believe that she wanted her parents dead so she could be with Jeremy and then presumably have all their assets, which is flawed. Again, she was 12. All assets would have gone to an actual grown ass adult, an aunt, whatever, some other family member.
Mhm.
But Tyler Jacob hadn't done anything to cause her being angry. Why did she kill him? And I believe she killed him, not Jeremy.
We'll talk about the reason she gives later, but I think you're right in pointing to the fact that she was the one who wanted her family dead. It seemed like she killed her little brother for a clean break. It's not as if they covered up their crimes, so I don't think it was to avoid leaving a witness. So, with her family out of the way, Jasmine and Jeremy then proceeded to go to a house party where they were seen laughing and kissing. 18-year-old Belinda Hope said that Jeremy arrived at her boyfriend's house, which was presumably the site of this house party, with Jasmine on the afternoon following the murders. When he removed his sunglasses, the black eye Mitchell had previously seen was on full display. The day her family's bodies were discovered was the first time Jasmine met Belinda, and while Belinda initially thought Jasmine seemed okay, when talking to the pair, she had to awkwardly move away from them after they ended their conversation to start making out, which is super classy.
Super classy. A week before the murders, Jasmine had snuck out to go have sex with Jeremy in his trailer. After the murders had occurred, they again had sex at a friend's apartment. Jasmine's response to why she had sex at 12: I loved him so much. I thought it would bring us closer together. This is gross. She is a literal child.
Let me just say that while I do believe Jasmine came up with the plan to murder her family, she was still 12. So, no matter how immature Jeremy was, he was still over a decade older than her and an adult. So, this was statutory rape, not sex. And he was at least physically taking advantage of her. So, I hope this question was asked in the aim of eliciting Jasmine to respond that Jeremy pressured her instead of implying that she was the one in the wrong.
100% agree. She was a child. He groomed and took advantage of her. And yes, it's statutory rape. Age of consent in Canada is 16. There are some exceptions, but none where a 12 and 23-year-old are concerned. Obviously, it sounds like Jeremy was immature, and it's noted that he seemed like a teenager. Even so, he's not a teenager. If he was 17 and she was 12, it would still be illegal.
Exactly. As police continued their investigation following the Richardson murders and Jasmine's disappearance, they found emails and other digital evidence leading to Jasmine and Jeremy. This led to the pair's arrest in Leader, Saskatchewan, which is approximately an hour and a half drive from Medicine Hat, on April 24th, the day after the bodies were found. One RCMP, which stands for Royal Canadian Mounted Police, officer present at the arrest stated that Jasmine, who still had Deborah's wallet in her possession, Jeremy, and three other girls began laughing and shouting obscenities once placed in the back of the police car.
I mean, what the fuck? Not that we should always be scared of authority, but can you imagine you start laughing in the back of the police car? Maybe Jasmine was laughing because even though she is being arrested, she is 12. She's going to blame everything on Jeremy. It's not like she will be in prison if convicted for years.
I just don't feel like either of them took the murder seriously. I think they thought of themselves as two lovers on the run, like it was some sort of twisted game that's now over.
Yeah, but who were the girls with them? We don't know anything about the third, but we do know that an unnamed girl and 19-year-old Casey Lancaster were also arrested and charged with accessory to murder for their alleged roles in attempting to assist with concealing the crime.
Casey had been at Jeremy's trailer the night of the murders. The next day, she planned to drive her friend, who was running away from her mother and foster parents, along with a couple of other people, to Leader, Saskatchewan. This group also included Jeremy and Jasmine, who were concealed in the covered cargo box. And Casey, who had previously had a crush on Jeremy, said she drove the couple because she didn't know about the murders, which may be true, but it does seem suspicious that they were hidden in Jeremy's truck. Whether anyone else in the group thought it was suspicious or not, they all got to Leader that night. All the gas stations were closed, and they were almost out of fuel, so the group slept in the truck in a field. While they were at a gas station the following morning, the group purchased a newspaper with its front page devoted to the Richardson murders. In her shock, Casey didn't contact the police about being with the daughter who had disappeared.
Could she have, like, I don't know, hidden inside the gas station and asked the clerk to call 911?
That definitely would have been the best reaction, but I think her argument is that she was so shocked that she couldn't think to address the crimes in any way. That ultimately didn't matter though, because as we said earlier, police caught up with the group in Leader that day and arrested all five of them, including Jasmine and Jeremy.
Casey testified that on the day the Richardsons' bodies were discovered, she had driven Jeremy's truck to an abandoned parking lot and helped clean the bloodstains off the seat under the assumption that it was a result of a fight, given Jeremy's black eye and the fact that he had provided no explanation for why he wanted her to clean his truck. Maybe she still liked Jeremy. I mean, girl, have a spine. Tell him to clean his own freaking truck. A black eye would not cause him to bleed all over his truck. She also took out a large folding knife to prevent it from being stolen.
Again, suspicious, but I do get not wanting to ask too many questions.
Yeah, Casey was charged with being an accessory to murder after the fact, and the other girl, who was 15 at the time, pled guilty to obstruction of justice and received a 20-month probation sentence. This unnamed girl testified that she had used marijuana and cocaine on the days leading up to and the days following the murders. She said that she had also helped clean the passenger side of Jeremy's truck without knowing the reason it needed to be cleaned. Like Casey, she told the court that she only found out about the crimes when she read the newspaper.
It does seem a bit odd that they didn't hear Jeremy and Jasmine discussing the murders because they couldn't keep their mouths shut about them. Beyond Jeremy saying Jasmine was laughing about it the next day, witnesses claim that Jeremy said Jasmine's family had been gutted like fish. Later on, a former provincial sheriff and the sheriff of Medicine Hat at the time overheard Jeremy tell another inmate as Jeremy was being moved from the courthouse to the remand center on May 2nd, 2006. She did the brother, and I did the mom and dad. As for more of Jeremy's stellar statements, when asked if Jasmine was crazy and whose plan it had been, Jeremy responded, "Yeah, she's fucking crazy. I'm just a little bit crazy, but the drugs didn't help. It was all her idea, but when someone you love asks you to do something, you do it." He added, "When you find your soulmate, you do anything for them. I did anything."
Alrighty then. On top of all that, during Jeremy's police van ride from Medicine Hat to Calgary to receive a psychiatric assessment on May 4th, 2006, which seems appropriate, he joked about the murders.
So I do give a bit of side eye to the three girls saying they never heard Jeremy and Jasmine talking about them.
Yeah, they wanted to brag. They wanted to, look what we did. Yeah, I find that hard to believe too.
Yeah.
During the trip for a psychiatric assessment, Jeremy bragged to an undercover police officer posing as an inmate about the triple murders, saying that after Mark hit him in the eye with a screwdriver, Jeremy stabbed him. His self preservation skills seemed to be non existent.
As does his awareness of the consequences of his crimes.
Yeah. Jeremy said that when he tried to dissuade Jasmine from killing her family, she had only become more upset. However, he now bragged that he and Jasmine have become legends. He discussed his plans for his Gothic wedding to Jasmine, the matching wedding ring tattoos they would get, and the future. I mean, everybody wants this 100-room castle they plan to buy in Germany once they got the necessary funds together. Jeremy also admitted to having had dark thoughts for as long as he could remember and to having drunk blood before. Despite this initial bravado, he later claimed that Jasmine had been the one to plan the crimes and that he was only attempting to act like a tough criminal during this 100-minute taped conversation, which would benefit him how? His immaturity and fantastical thinking were definitely on display.
The only thing that comes to mind is that maybe he thought his toughness would get around and help him in prison, but again, I'm not sure how far either he or Jasmine thought into the future. Okay, loath as I am to do so, let's talk about Jasmine's appearance. First, I'll echo what has been said before. She did look older than 12. I'd be hesitant to say she looked 16, but I could definitely believe she was 14. Did this mean it was okay for a 23-year-old to have sex with her? It sure fucking doesn't. There is also a description of photos she posted online before the murders of her wearing tight black clothes and apparently sucking on a finger in a suggestive manner. And I get that's how she was trying to portray herself. But I have to say, I feel a little gross describing a 12-year-old as suggestive.
I agree. It's gross. I know much has been said about this, though I didn't want to. I did Google and look at some of her pics with the eyeliner and the way she is posing. She does look older. I think she probably could have passed for 16. I think people miss the point. Yes, she lied and said she was 16, but the freaking burden is still on Jeremy. I don't care how old she looked in her pictures. He is completely to blame for having any kind of contact with her when he realized she was 12. I also think it would have been inappropriate if she had been 16. Seriously.
I mean, that would have still been a 7-year age difference. The chasm between your teens and 20s can't be overestimated. However, when she testified, Jasmine dressed conservatively in black pants and a blue blouse with her hair pulled back behind her head, which is to be expected. If I was her defense attorney, I would have had her dress like that too. To an extent, a trial is a performance, and you'll do whatever you can to sell your narrative.
It truly is like theater. You just hope the jury is able to see the truth. Due to her age, Jasmine was and still is known to the Canadian public as JR due to the Youth Criminal Justice Act. At the age of 13, she pleaded not guilty and claimed that she had only ever had hypothetical conversations late into the night with Jeremy about killing her parents, who stood in the way of them being together. These hypothetical conversations saw them going through different ways of committing the murders, such as by staging a murder suicide or hitting them over the head while they were asleep, then lighting the house on fire, as Jasmine's earlier drawings seemed to indicate. These possible plans also included murdering Tyler Jacob, who Jasmine didn't think would do well as an orphan.
And there's the reason she gave for having to kill her brother. She seems to be trying to say that it was really a mercy killing.
I mean, come on.
Mm.
Also, according to Jasmine, she had never been serious. This was the kind of stupid talk all her friends engaged in. She said that she and Jeremy had only vented about killing her parents because they didn't want them to see each other. Sorry, this, in my opinion, is just such bullshit. I know it's normal to butt heads with your parents when they tell you what you can and can't do. However, saying, I hate them, they are so unfair is completely different than talking about various hypothetical ways to murder them. It wasn't hypothetical.
I can almost see a dramatic teenager saying they wish their parents were dead, which isn't great, but that still feels different than plotting how they themselves would murder them. And the jury shared our line of thinking because after 3 hours of deliberation on November 8th, 2007, they found her guilty on 3 counts of first degree murder at the Court of Queen's Bench in Medicine Hat, an acknowledgement that, contrary to Jasmine's story, the murders had in fact been planned. After being convicted at 13, Jasmine spent 4 years in a psychiatric institution, then 4 years and 6 months under supervision in the community. Having spent a year and 6 months in custody prior to her conviction, this decade long intensive rehabilitative custody and supervision, or IRCS sentence, reflected the maximum sentencing guidelines for children between the ages of 12 and 14. An IRCS sentence, which was still quite new in 2007, is an option for, quote, serious violent offenders who may have a mental or psychological disorder or an emotional disturbance, end quote, as a way to gradually reintegrate the offender.
We'll come back to her diagnoses in a bit. For now, let's take a look at Jeremy's trial and conviction. Then 25-year-old Jeremy, now going by Jackson May, was also found guilty of 3 counts of first degree murder on December 15th, 2008, and was sentenced to serve 3 concurrent life sentences with no possibility of parole for the first 25 years. His appeal against his sentence was denied. At his trial, 19-year-old Jordan Atfield, who was Jeremy's roommate for a couple of months after he ran away from his foster home, said that he heard Jeremy and Jasmine talking about killing her parents. He also stated that Jeremy had asked for him to help with the murders not once, but twice. The first time, Jordan ignored Jeremy, but when he later told Jeremy he didn't plan on killing anyone, Jeremy became angry. Even though Jeremy had previously threatened to assault or kill others when enraged, Jordan never thought he was serious.
Those around them thinking Jasmine and Jeremy were joking seems to be a common theme in this case, which I do get.
I suppose, but when he asks for your help, maybe reassess that he may be serious.
I feel like it had to have been wishful thinking. Surely the guy I'm staying with isn't actually plotting a murder and asking for my help. I mean, I wouldn't want to think that either. Jeremy's childhood best friend, Grant Bolt, also told the court that Jeremy had become more aloof after meeting Jasmine. He said that Jeremy would ask, is love worth killing for? And also requested Grant's help in the murders. But like Jordan, Grant refused. Jeremy, though, didn't feel like he had that option because he had claimed that Jasmine would leave him if he didn't kill Debra and Marc.
Let her. I mean, Jesus, it's just all so fucked up.
That really just sums it up. Despite having known Jeremy for 11 years, Grant's friendship with Jeremy changed before the murders as Jeremy became obsessed with the goth scene and eager to fight anyone around him. Again, I don't think the goth scene is the problem here.
Hear, hear. Grant acknowledged Jeremy's substance use disorders, stating that he smoked 4 to 5 joints per day. However, Grant also admitted that, as Jeremy had, he had spent the day of the murders doing lines of coke and drinking excessively, which the defense used to question his credibility. Grant added that on the day the Richardsons' bodies were discovered, and while they were both at Grant's apartment, Jeremy removed his dark sunglasses to show Grant his injured eye, which he said had happened when Mark attacked him and before Jeremy stabbed him to death. Even though Jeremy's trial took place in Calgary to avoid having a biased jury, the sentencing hearing was moved to Medicine Hat to give the community closure.
Deborah's brother came from Ontario to Medicine Hat for Jeremy's sentencing hearing to read his victim impact statement, which, despite or perhaps because of the fact that Deborah's and Mark's parents and siblings were in counseling for their anger and grief, read in part, quote, I will never understand why she was taken. I will never understand the works of sick, twisted minds. But I do understand forgiveness. So, what is for her sake, in the thought of deep love for my sister, who I know is watching over us now, that I extend forgiveness? End quote. I'm always astounded by victims and their families who offer forgiveness to the perpetrators. I have so much admiration for them, but I just don't know if I'd be able to do that. I think I'm too vengeful. So much kudos to them, and I hope it helps them heal as much as you can heal when you've experienced that kind of trauma, that is.
Yeah, definitely kudos to them. I'm sure in their minds, forgiveness is allowing them to move forward and not live in a constant, state of despair and anger. They are better people than I am. I would not offer the murders of a family member forgiveness. I would just live with my vengeance, which is probably really unhealthy, but there you go. In Jasmine and Jeremy's letters to each other after being sentenced, they promised to get married and made no mention of feelings of any remorse or guilt.
But this Gothic wedding never happened because after being sentenced, Jasmine underwent treatment and rehabilitation. Coming back to the diagnoses we mentioned earlier, psychiatrists diagnosed her with oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. She then went to court 1 to 2 times per year for favorable progress updates and was even called a poster child for the effectiveness of rehabilitation.
I'm sorry, really? So, did she grow out of her oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder, or because her parents were dead, did these feelings dissipate?
I'm leaning towards the latter. But following Jasmine's review in November 2009, Jasmine was granted an open arrangement to go on chaperoned walks on the grounds of Alberta Hospital in Edmonton, the psychiatric hospital in which she was being held, and later to malls and banks on both supervised and unsupervised trips that required the Solicitor General's approval.
The next year, Jasmine's doctor and caseworker reported that she was making progress in therapy and had an average score of 80% in academic core subjects while at Alberta Hospital in Edmonton. Then, in the fall of 2011, Jasmine was released from the psychiatric hospital and at nearly 18 years old began attending Mount Royal University in Calgary and living in a Calgary group home. University isn't free in Canada. I wonder who paid for that.
That's a good point. Do you think it's similar to how prisoners can earn degrees in the States, often through grants? And I do, of course, understand how that could facilitate rehabilitation for some.
I mean, maybe.
By the end of 2012, the court heard Jasmine take responsibility for her crimes and show remorse. However, on February 17th, 2015, 21-year-old Jasmine applied for the removal of her Monday through Thursday night curfew, but the justice agreed with her rehabilitation team in keeping the curfew in place until she transitioned to living independently and this adjustment could be assessed, which happened in August of that year when the court decided she was at the lowest risk of reoffending within her rehabilitation period and the curfew was repealed.
A little over 10 years after the murders in May 2016, 22-year-old Jasmine had her final court hearing. She spoke to the court on a closed circuit TV to thank the judge, but not to apologize or express remorse for murdering her family. Considered to have met each goal put in place during her rehabilitation and to be at a low risk of reoffending, Jasmine was released. Having consulted reports from Jasmine's probation officer, Court of Queen's bench Justice Scott Brooker, who had overseen Jasmine's case from the very beginning, stated, quote, "You've indicated through your conduct you have a desire to atone for what you did. Wait for it. I think your parents and brother would be proud of you. Clearly, you cannot undo the past. You can only live each day with the knowledge that you can control how you behave," end quote.
Is it just me who feels uncomfortable with the statement that Deborah, Mark, and Tyler Jacob would be proud of her? It's a nice sentiment, I guess, but it feels off.
I mean, that is more than a reach. How can you say the family that you murdered would be proud of you? That makes me feel like I need to go shower. It's great. She met all these goals she needed as part of her rehabilitation. Again, all just my opinion, but no one indicated Jasmine wasn't smart. Could she not have just behaved in a way that she knew she had to so she could get out of prison?
It's hard not to at least consider that. And Brent Sekundayak, the inspector who was one of the first authorities to arrive at the Richardson home, did worry that Jasmine was at risk reoffending. He said, "I don't truly understand it, an act of horror and violence like that. But I hope we can just find peace and move on. My biggest fear is that she's tricked those in the system, that she hasn't moved forward. I hope she's truly taken responsibility for this and is able to move forward."
Bravo. I so agree with Mr. Secondayak.
Same. And while some want to give Jasmine a second chance, other residents who still lived near the Richardson family home are similarly unhappy about her returning to live at a secret location in Medicine Hat.
Of course they are. I mean, what if they run into her at the freaking grocery store?
Yeah.
Ted Clugson, the mayor of Medicine Hat, falls somewhere in the middle. Because she was only 12 when the murders were committed, he thought she should be released, but didn't believe she should come back to Medicine Hat. He said it was a terrible place for her, and if she ever got found out or recognized, it probably wouldn't be in her best interest.
Which is hard to disagree with.
Since her release, Jasmine has remained relatively anonymous and has not reoffended. Due to this, in 2020, her record was formally expunged. Although it is unknown if she still speaks to Jeremy, you would have to think that doing so would go against authorities' assessment of her wanting to atone for her actions. She is the youngest Canadian to ever have been convicted of multiple counts of first degree murder. I understand she was 12. She should have not spent her life in prison. I don't, however, think her record should have been expunged.
Which leads to us talking about rehabilitation, specifically in Jasmine's case. Co author of When Children Kill and criminal justice professor at Humber College in Toronto, Mark Totten said that because she was so young at the time, there's a greater likelihood that she could recover from her oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. However, he acknowledged that each case is unique, so there's no way of knowing for sure if she's changed. And what do these diagnoses mean? Oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD, is characterized by defiant and hostile behavior towards those in authority. At first, when I read that description, I was like, isn't that just being a teenager? But it goes beyond being irritable and argumentative, as it can also include vindictive behavior. ODD most often develops by the time a child turns 8, and it affects between 2% and 11% of children. Additionally, approximately 30% of children diagnosed with ODD also have conduct disorder, Jasmine's second diagnosis.
Lovely. Conduct disorder is more serious because it is distinguished by aggressive behavior, harming others, and violent social norms. Conduct disorder most commonly develops in those between the ages of 10 and 19, but it can also appear prior to the age of 10. It affects between 2% and 10% of young people in the US. Interestingly, conduct disorder is very similar to antisocial personality disorder. Children are usually diagnosed with conduct disorder, and if an adult displays symptoms for both disorders, they would be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, not conduct disorder. Both ODD and conduct disorder can be treated with community based treatments like parent management training that rewards positive behaviors and psychotherapy, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, which focuses on developing problem solving skills. Given that Jasmine spent years in a psychiatric hospital and had her progress measured, it's more than possible that she has learned to manage the conditions. I mean, we can only hope.
That said, she only served 10 years for 3 counts of first degree murder and was released at the age of 22. That's still so young. The brain doesn't finish maturing until the mid to late 20s, and the prefrontal cortex, which is the part we use to make good choices and to plan our lives, is one of the last areas of the brain to finish developing. In my opinion, which doesn't mean much, I think she should have served 15 to 20 years in accordance with the severity of her crimes and to monitor her as her brain finished developing. I'm not saying that had to be in prison, and I'm in no way arguing with professionals who said she was making progress while serving her IRCS sentence. But if I was living in Medicine Hat, I would feel better with that length of time.
I agree with that. And how about if you're going to release her so early? Maybe they don't do that. But, in an ideal world, none of this would have happened, obviously. But I don't know. Is there some kind of, not that she's just fine and she's just out at 22 and that's it? Maybe like, I don't know, every 6 months, every year, some kind of continued evaluation?
Yeah, I think that would be for the best. And maybe Jeremy did groom her and brainwash her into thinking they were romantically involved because it certainly wasn't a relationship. She was a child and he was an adult. So, once again, they were most definitely not having consensual sex. It was statutory rape. But I do think Jasmine was the one to plan the murders, that she also killed her brother, and that she was the one to facilitate Jeremy killing her parents.
Yeah, as I mentioned, he totally groomed her and should have ran far, far away when he realized she was 12. However, I feel like the one making the decisions was Jasmine. I think she used Jeremy. I think she wanted her parents dead. Like I mentioned, I don't think she could have physically murdered them. So she talked Jeremy into it. I also think that she had planned on killing her little brother from the beginning, and she felt like killing him was something that she could physically do.
Hmm.
Okay, everyone, that's where we're going to end today. Next week, we'll be continuing our series on Daughters Who Kill when we discuss the case of Jennifer Pan. All the sources we use for this episode are in the show notes below. If you'd like to suggest a case or theme for us to discuss, feel free to email us at terrifyinglytypicalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us at Terrifyingly Typical Podcast on Instagram and at Terrifyingly Typical Pod on TikTok. Leave us a comment below to let us know what you thought of this case. We'd love to hear your opinions.
See you next week.